The 70s gave us some incredible music, but it also gave us songs that made people change the radio station immediately. Some were overplayed to death, others were just plain annoying, and a few were so saccharine they could give you a toothache. These are the top 10 most hated songs of the 1970s. Number 10. Feelings by Morris Albert. Morris Albert's 1975 ballad became one of the most divisive songs of the decade. It hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and seemed to play everywhere you went. The problem wasn't just the song itself, though its syrupy sentimentality didn't help. The real issue was that you couldn't escape it. Radio stations played it constantly. Lounge singers added it to their repertoires. Elevators piped it through their speakers. By 1976, people were actively turning off the radio when it came on. The song became shorthand for everything people found cloying about mid-70s pop music. What made it particularly grating was the repetitive melody. The word feelings gets stretched out and repeated so many times that it stops sounding like a real word. Critics savaged it, and it regularly appears on worst songs of all time lists. Even people who initially liked it grew to hate it through sheer overexposure. The melody itself was simple to the point of being monotonous. It didn't help that every instrumental break seemed to feature the same tired chord progressions that had been recycled countless times before. The orchestration was lush but generic, the kind of arrangement that could have worked for dozens of other ballads. The predictability made it even more grating on repeated listens. What's particularly remarkable is how quickly public opinion turned. When it first came out, many people genuinely enjoyed it. But within months, admitting you liked Feelings became embarrassing. The song went from being a hit to being a punchline faster than almost any other song of the decade. Albert tried to follow it up with other releases, but nothing stuck. He became forever associated with this one song, which probably wasn't the legacy he hoped for. The song did introduce a useful phrase into the cultural vocabulary, though. Saying something gave you feelings became a sarcastic way to mock overly sentimental music. Number 9. Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn. This 1973 song was inescapable. It spent 4 weeks at number 1 and sold 3 million copies in just 3 weeks. The problem was that its success meant you heard it everywhere, constantly, for months on end. Radio stations played it to death, and the public quickly grew tired of it. The song's premise is actually rather dark when you think about it. A man getting out of prison writes to his wife asking if she still wants him. If she does, she should tie a yellow ribbon around an oak tree. If not, he'll just keep moving. It's basically a story about a convicted criminal testing whether his relationship survived his incarceration. But the production was so relentlessly upbeat and cheerful that it glossed over any complexity. It became the audio equivalent of forced optimism. The melody was catchy to the point of being irritating, and once it got stuck in your head, it stayed there for days. The performance was aggressively peppy, with Tony Orlando's voice straining with manufactured enthusiasm. Dawn's backing vocals added layers of saccharine sweetness that made the whole thing feel like it was aimed at kindergartners rather than adults. The arrangement featured all the standard early 70s production tricks: prominent strings, hand claps, and a relentlessly driving beat. Lounge singers everywhere added it to their acts. By the summer of 1973, you couldn't go to a wedding, bar mitzvah, or hotel lobby without hearing some version of it. The oversaturation killed whatever charm it might have originally had. Even Tony Orlando seemed to recognize this later in life, rarely performing it in his later years. The song's success led to Tony, Orlando, and Dawn getting their own CBS variety show, which replaced Sonny and Cher. That show lasted a few years, but the song that launched it remains one of the most divisive hits of the decade. Number 8. Afternoon Delight by Starland Vocal Band.
Skyrockets in flight. Afternoon Delight.
When this song came out in 1976, a lot of people didn't immediately realize it was about daytime sex. Once they figured it out, reactions were mixed at best. The group tried to make midday romance sound wholesome and fun, but the result was just awkward.
Afternoon Delight.
The production was so over the top that it felt like a parody. The harmonies were saccharine, the arrangements were cloying, and the whole thing had an uncomfortable earnestness to it. It sounded like something from a Saturday Night Live sketch, except it was completely serious. The bright, bouncy arrangement clashed awkwardly with what was essentially a song about extramarital activity. The vocals were performed by two married couples, which somehow made the whole thing even more uncomfortable. Their cheerful delivery of lyrics about sneaking away for afternoon encounters felt like listening to your parents try to be hip. The innocence of the performance clashed horribly with the subject matter. Despite all this, or maybe because of it, the song became a massive hit. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won a Grammy for Best Arrangement for Voices. This baffled critics and confused a lot of listeners. How did something this awkward become so successful?
Started out this morning feeling so polite, I always thought of fish.
Radio overplayed it relentlessly. By the end of summer 1976, people were groaning every time it came on. The Starland Vocal Band never had another significant hit, making them one of the most prominent one-hit wonders of the decade. They broke up just a few years later.
Afternoon Delight.
The song has become a punchline over the years. It regularly appears on lists of the worst songs ever recorded. Even fans of 70s soft rock often draw the line at Afternoon Delight. It's become the go-to example of how wrong the decade could get when it came to pop music.
Afternoon Delight.
Number 7. Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
Terry Jacks' 1974 mega hit is about a dying man saying goodbye to his loved ones. It was based on a Belgian song from the early 1960s, originally performed by Jacques Brel. The English lyrics were written by poet Rod McEwen, and they're devastatingly sad.
My Michelle, my little one.
The problem is that Jacks couldn't really sing. His voice was thin and reedy, lacking the power needed to sell such emotionally heavy material. What should have been a moving farewell became grating and whiny. The production didn't help, wrapping the depressing subject matter in a bizarrely upbeat arrangement.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
The vocal performance was particularly problematic. Jacks's voice cracked on the high notes, not in an emotionally affecting way, but in a way that suggested he simply lacked the technical ability to hit them properly. His phrasing was awkward, often emphasizing the wrong words and breaking up lines in strange places.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
The song still became a worldwide #1 hit in 1974. It was one of the biggest songs of the year, which meant it got played constantly. People who were already dealing with the aftermath of Watergate and Vietnam didn't particularly want to hear a song about death every time they turned on the radio. The juxtaposition between the cheerful melody and the morbid lyrics created cognitive dissonance. It felt manipulative, like the song was trying to force tears from listeners through sheer emotional manipulation, rather than genuine artistry. Critics were merciless, and public opinion turned against it quickly.
Goodbye, Papa, it's hard to die.
Jacks largely retired from music just a few years after this hit. The song remains divisive to this day. Some people defend it as genuinely moving, but far more remember it as one of the most irritating songs of the decade.
We had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun.
Number 6. Billy Don't Be a Hero by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods. This 1974 song tells the tragic story of a woman whose boyfriend dies in the Civil War. It's melodramatic in the extreme, with heavy-handed lyrics and an overwrought performance. The group tried to create an emotional epic, but ended up with something that felt calculated and artificial. The production was typical mid-70s soft rock, all strings and acoustic guitars. The problem was that the arrangement was completely at odds with the supposedly tragic storyline. It sounded more like background music for a department store than a song about war and death. The vocal performance leaned heavily into the drama, with exaggerated emotion on every line. But instead of feeling genuine, it came across as theatrical in the worst way. The backing vocals added layers of artificial urgency that made the whole thing feel staged. Radio stations loved it, playing it constantly through the spring and summer of 1974. It hit #1 and sold millions of copies. But the public quickly grew tired of its manipulative approach to emotion. The song tried so hard to make listeners cry that it had the opposite effect. Critics were brutal in their assessments. Many pointed out that the Civil War framing made little sense, given the song was clearly meant to reference Vietnam. The whole thing felt dishonest, using historical distance to avoid actually engaging with current events. It was war as melodrama rather than real tragedy. Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods never matched this success. They had a few more minor hits, but nothing significant. The group is remembered almost exclusively for this song, which has become a staple of worst songs lists. It represents everything that could go wrong when 70s pop tried to tackle serious subjects. Number 5.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
Captain and Tennille's 1976 hit about two muskrats falling in love remains one of the most polarizing songs of the decade. The song isn't an allegory or metaphor, it's literally about muskrats. The duo even included synthesized sounds meant to simulate muskrat noises. The song peaked at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hit number 1 on the Easy Listening chart. It became their biggest adult contemporary hit, spending 4 weeks at the top. This success meant constant radio play, and the public reaction was swift and negative.
It's like Muskrat Love.
The lyrics were bizarre, detailing the courtship between Muskrat Susie and Muskrat Sam. They nibbled on bacon, chewed on cheese, and did various activities that were presumably meant to sound romantic, but just sounded weird. The synthesizer effects that mimicked muskrat sounds at the end of the song were played on a loop in the run-out groove of the 45. So they continued until someone lifted the needle. What really turned people against it was the White House performance. In July 1976, Captain and Tennille performed at a state dinner honoring Queen Elizabeth II. They chose to sing Muskrat Love. One dinner guest told the press it was in very poor taste to sing about mating rodents before the Queen. The comment made national news. Tony Tennille defended the song, calling it a gentle, Disney-like tune. But the damage was done. People couldn't believe this was what America chose to present to British royalty. The song became a national embarrassment. What had been merely annoying became actively humiliating. The song has topped numerous worst songs lists over the years. A 2006 CNN poll ranked it among the worst songs of all time. Even Jerry Beckley of America, who recorded an earlier version, essentially admitted the original was better, and that subsequent versions just made it worse.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
Number 4, You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone. Debbie Boone's 1977 ballad was the biggest hit of the decade, spending 10 consecutive weeks at number 1. But that massive success also made it one of the most hated songs of the era. By early 1978, people were actively sick of it. The song was everywhere. Radio stations played it constantly. It was inescapable at weddings and school dances. Elevators played it. Department stores played it. There was no refuge. What started as a pleasant enough ballad became torture through overexposure. The production was relentlessly saccharine. Boone's voice, while technically competent, lacked any real emotional depth. She later admitted she had no creative freedom in recording it. and was told to copy the original demo exactly. The result felt manufactured and emotionally hollow. The arrangement featured all the standard late 70s easy listening production: sweeping strings, gentle piano, and layer upon layer of soft orchestration. Every element was designed to maximize emotional manipulation, but the calculation behind it was so obvious that it backfired for many listeners. The vague lyrics made it popular for both romantic and religious contexts, which somehow made it more annoying. It was trying to be everything to everyone, and in doing so became genuinely meaningful to no one. Critics called it trite, maudlin, and syrupy. Radio DJs started apologizing before playing it. Comedians made jokes about it being used as torture. People would groan audibly when they heard the opening notes. The backlash was so severe that it essentially ended Boone's pop career. Her follow-up singles all flopped. The song won numerous awards, including Song of the Year at both the Grammys and the Oscars. But commercial success and critical acclaim couldn't save it from public hatred. It became shorthand for everything wrong with mid-70s easy listening. Number 3. Having My Baby by Paul Anka. Paul Anka's 1974 comeback hit about the joys of impending fatherhood was saccharine, even by 70s standards. The song hit number 1 and gave Anka his first chart topper since 1959, but its ultra-sentimental approach to pregnancy made many listeners uncomfortable. The production was typical mid-70s soft rock, all strings and gentle acoustic guitars, but the lyrics were what really bothered people. The repeated emphasis on possession, "You're having my baby," struck many as outdated and sexist, even in 1974. The song tried to capture the joy of starting a family, but came across as maudlin and cloying. The melody was repetitive, and the arrangement was so sweet it practically induced diabetes. Radio overplay made it even worse. By late 1974, people were changing stations immediately when it came on. Anka's vocal performance dripped with sincerity to the point of being uncomfortable. Every syllable was delivered with maximum emotion, as if he was trying to convince listeners how deeply he felt, rather than letting the song speak for itself. The result was exhausting to listen to. Critics savaged it. They called it everything from outdated to actively offensive. The possessive framing bothered feminist critics particularly, who pointed out that the woman's perspective was completely absent. She was just a vessel for his baby in the song's worldview. Despite, or perhaps because of the controversy, the song was a massive commercial success. It was one of the biggest hits of 1974, but that success came at the cost of Anka's credibility with younger listeners. He became associated with exactly the kind of music that punk rock would soon rebel against. The song got a brief revival in 2009 when Glee featured it in an episode. But even that couldn't rehabilitate its reputation. It remains one of the most mocked songs of the decade, a perfect example of 70s sentimentality gone wrong. Number 2. Shannon by Henry Gross. Henry Gross's 1976 ballad about a dog dying was genuinely heartfelt. Gross wrote it after learning that Beach Boys' Carl Wilson's Irish setter had died. But sincerity doesn't automatically make for good music, and Shannon became one of the most divisive songs of the decade. The song reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, which meant substantial radio play, and that's where the problem started. The song is unrelentingly sad, with Gross singing about a beloved pet's death in great detail. It wasn't what people wanted to hear during their commute or at parties. The production was soft rock at its mushiest. Gentle acoustic guitars, strings, and Gross's earnest vocals combined to create something that many found mawkish and manipulative. The song seemed designed to make listeners cry, which some found emotionally coercive. The lyrics describe the dog in loving detail, recounting specific memories and the pain of loss. While this level of detail might work in a poem, in a pop song, it felt excessive and self-indulgent. The emotional intensity never let up, offering no relief from the sadness.
Finally, the tears fill our eyes.
Radio stations played it constantly through summer 1976. People grew tired of being emotionally ambushed by a song about a dead dog every time they turned on the radio. The song became known for clearing out rooms at parties. Someone would put it on as a joke, and everyone would groan. Critics were mixed, but public opinion was firmly against it. Many felt it represented everything wrong with mid-70s soft rock: overwrought emotions, manipulative production, and subject matter that didn't really warrant a hit single. It became a punchline, referenced whenever someone wanted to mock the decade's excesses. Gross never had another significant hit. He continued making music, but Shannon defined his career. It's not the legacy most artists would want, being remembered for making millions of people sad about a dog they never met. Number 1, Disco Duck by Rick Dees.
Look at me, I'm the disco duck.
Rick Dees' 1976 novelty hit was designed to cash in on the disco craze. The Memphis disc jockey recorded himself making duck sounds over a disco beat, and somehow it became a number 1 hit. It spent a week at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1976 and sold over 6 million copies worldwide. The song's success was its downfall. What might have been a harmless novelty became actively annoying through overexposure. Radio stations played it constantly. Kids loved it, which meant parents heard it endlessly. The duck sounds that were initially amusing became grating after the 10th or 100th listen. The production was bare-bones disco, a simple 4-on-the-floor beat, basic bass line, and those relentless duck quacks. There was no musical sophistication to discover on repeated listens, nothing to make the song hold up over time. It was a one-joke song, and once you got the joke, there was nothing left. The timing couldn't have been worse. Disco Duck came out just as the backlash against disco was beginning to build. By associating itself so completely with disco's most ridiculous aspects, the song became a symbol of everything people found laughable about the genre. When the anti-disco movement peaked a few years later, Disco Duck was Exhibit A for why disco had to die. Fellow musicians refused to take Dees seriously. Radio stations that played the song often did so mockingly. Even Dees himself seemed to recognize what had happened. He tried releasing follow-up singles like Disc Gorilla, but nothing came close to matching the success. Each attempt only reinforced the joke. The song appears on virtually every worst songs list ever compiled. It's become shorthand for novelty records that should never have been recorded. Music critics point to it as proof that commercial success and artistic merit have nothing to do with each other. Dees eventually pivoted fully into radio, where he found substantial success as a DJ and countdown show host. But his brief moment as a recording artist became a punchline that followed him for decades. Disco Duck remains one of the most mocked songs in pop music history, the perfect example of everything that was wrong with novelty records and disco excess combined into one unforgettable disaster.
Look at me, I'm the disco duck.
The 70s gave us incredible music that still holds up today, but it also gave us these songs that people loved to hate. Some were annoying from the start, others became unbearable through overplay, and a few were just plain ridiculous. They're part of the decade's legacy, for better or worse, reminding us that even in music's greatest eras, not everything ages well. Sometimes the most successful songs become the most hated, proving that popularity and quality don't always go hand in hand. If you enjoyed this trip through music history, give us a like and subscribe for more. And let us know in the comments which of these songs you remember hating or secretly still enjoy.